We met Matthew Gravelyn after Megan's first Diary of a First-Time DM video. Matt was the writer and designer of Humblewood, a D&D 5e setting that puts you into the lives of birdfolk and other woodland creatures. Humblewood is also our newest venture on the stream that Megan's decided to DM for the first time. Matt also created Mall Kids, which we've gotten to play on the stream as well, and we loved it. I'm going to talk with him about both of these projects and himself in this Conversation with the Creator. I'm here with Matthew Gravelyn, who was the writer and designer of Humblewood, as well as several other RPGs. Matt, thank you for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I guess this is my first time on. I've been around. I've lurked in streams. I've commented on YouTube videos, but so this is my grand entrance to actual video.
Perfect. I guess I just want to start with thank you, one, for making Humblewood, because I was super excited to back the Kickstarter, and even more excited when we got it and Megan decided she was going to DM with it. It is gorgeous, but it's also written very well, which I know you had you were there at the beginning of the design of this game. So my first question sort of is just like, and in general, I find Humblewood very enticing, just like as a perspective. How did that whole idea come to you? How did that fall into your lap?
So I was engaged with the Deck of Many years ago to work on some like supplemental stuff. We had some other projects that I wanted to work on that didn't really pan out. And at that time, they were mostly just doing their kind of card packs and their small supplements. And then it came up that they wanted to get into these kind of like the bigger books, right? And realistically, if we're being completely honest, the seed of Humblewood came from the artist and who became the artistic director of the project, Leisha Hannigan. She put out just a couple of bird, like high fantasy bird drawings, art on her Twitter feed, and the people at Deck of Many saw it and they said, we have to like get involved in this. So one of my early tasks was creating kind of pitches to her to say like, here's what we want to do with these characters. Here's how we want to expand. Here's how we want to create it. And the name Humblewood has been around for a really long time in our design process. I couldn't tell you exactly when it came up, but the art was great. We created some pitches. Everybody was on board almost immediately. There was a little back and forth. And then it was just like Humblewood, pardon the pun, literally grew around us. It just kept, every time I talked with Leisha, we had just 1,000 good ideas and maybe like 2 bad ones. So like it just kept evolving and creating this space where we're all just saying, yes, this is good. This is good. And I don't think it would be any surprise to anybody to say like, oh, cute bird creatures and D&D on the internet is like a really good combination of stuff. But I don't feel like at any time we sat there and said, hey, we need to make a meme product. We need to make a product that is so marketable on the internet that it will sell regardless of what's inside. I think that's the culture that we are all kind of steeped in.
It wasn't a question.
Right. It became like, this is what we want. This is what we want to see. This is what we want to see. So right. It's of course what other people want to see. So that's one of my kind of like favorite parts about the whole thing is it feels like this super culturally relevant thing on the internet and the tabletop role-playing space. But we never like sat down and said, how do we create the most mass marketable product we possibly can? It was always just, how do we create the best, coolest story? So I'm absolutely thrilled that it was so well received. The Kickstarter was phenomenal. I do a Twitter search for Humblewood every couple of days when I'm feeling down and I just need to pick me up. I'm blown away at the reception of it.
It's definitely an awesome idea. And sort of bouncing off that, having D&D as a base, so I guess the first part of this question is, did you ever consider any like a unique sort of base, or was it always going to be D&D? And then the second part of the question was, what was the timeline like from that original concept idea to like the Kickstarter, starting?
Yeah. So it was always supposed to be D&D.
Okay.
Like I said, the Deck of Many has their roots in D&D. They originally started with these card supplements, and Humblewood comes with one of their own. There's these tarot card references for D&D, and they have monsters, NPCs, weapons, items, just tons of stuff. And that's really where this started, was like, hey, let's make a Humblewood deck of cards, right? And like I said, it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and we couldn't say no to any of it. And it eventually turned into like a pamphlet and a small deck of cards, and then like a big deck of cards, and then a bigger pamphlet, and then a whole book, and then maps, and then minis. And it just, none of those things were like sit down meetings where we said, how do we sell more cardboard? Like, that was never part of this process. It was just, this setting just kept growing. So it was always supposed to be D&D. And then my portion of it was a lot more of the upfront conceptualizing. I created the pitches for Alicia. I worked with Alicia to write kind of what you might call the first draft. My primary projects were the new Birdfolk races, the campaign, some of like the spells and items and things like that. So I kind of created this base. I created the world. That sounds super kind of arrogant, but like that was kind of what I did, was like set the stage. And then I worked on the project probably for about a year, like really actively. And then I started tapering off, and, you know, a new batch of kind of supplemental writers and editors and layout specialists started ramping up. And then Alicia started ramping up just dozens and dozens of super amazing, talented artists to fill the book and fill the cards with, you know, different art for the monsters, splash pages for settings, card art. So I would say probably, I'd have to double check, but I would say maybe something like 2 years from like when we first started talking about it to Kickstarter. It took a long time. I mean, you know, I publish a lot of like small stuff, and some of those games literally take like a week. Like from the very first bullet point written in a notepad to publishing it on itch is like a week. And the more and more you have in it, like this big guy right here, this isn't even like a big book, quote unquote.
Right.
But this, you know, you get into this, you exponentially increase your workload, because every page needs editing, every page needs layout, every page needs art, every page needs writing. So, you know, it was supposed to be kind of a short project for cards, and it spun out into this colossal world of products that, you know, just like I said, they just happened. They willed themselves into existence. We were just there for the process.
Well, and it just seems like, I mean, you're right that there are so many ideas that can blossom out of this. And so like, I see this growing into like an entire Humblewood like empire, because there's no way that this stops at one book and one set of this stuff. It's just going to keep going. So I'm hoping that you're on for the long run, because what I've read of this and the way that it's set up is gorgeous. Megan won't let me read all of it, but, you know, I love it just on what I've seen. And speaking of Megan, most people know, and you definitely know, that she has been doing her Diary of a First-Time DM videos, ramping up to us starting our own Humblewood campaign. What kind of advice would you give to dungeon masters that will be running Humblewood?
Yeah, so I have a lot of kind of feelings about the GMs, the DMs, the facilitators. It might be kind of odd to find that if you look at any of my other content, it's almost entirely GM-less. I make games that are run collaboratively. So I bring a lot of that in when I talk about running D&D also, is to keep it really collaborative. There was a little bit of discourse on Twitter recently about a very high-profile streaming group, and you know, there always comes questions of what are the differences between producing a show for people and having a game just kind of for yourself. And you know, Megan's going to be playing this game, and that's content that's going to be out there, so you always have to consider that. But I firmly believe that if you kind of let go a little bit, you and the players will find something interesting, and the viewers or the listeners, depending on your format, will engage with it. So similarly, Humblewood has a very rigid campaign, which I had a big hand in writing that campaign. So again, it might seem weird that I say, go off the rails and do whatever you feel like. And I wrote dozens of pages on very explicit campaign stuff for you to follow. That being said, there's a lot of stuff in here. And one of the things that Deck of Many and Hit Point Press are really good about is creating options within here. So this isn't like a super, it's linear, but there's options. There's things you can skip. There's things you can do in multiple ways. There's a whole section where you can kind of like, you're just trying to get between one level and the other. So there's just, here's 12 jobs you can go do in the forest. Go pick like 3 or 4 of them and do them in whatever order you want to do them in.
Sure.
And it kind of gives the DM especially, but also the party in general, just kind of a break from trucking along. But what I would say is that if my specific advice for Megan is if you're playing this game and you get a couple sessions in and it's really apparent that the players want to go do a thing or check something out and it's not in the book or it's not in the order the book presents it, figure out a way to do it. I mean, I just think you're going to be more, you guys will be more engaged, she will be more engaged, your viewers will be more engaged if everybody has this kind of general and genuine curiosity and passion about the game. So definitely, like, this book has everything you need. If you just want to play through this campaign kind of straight through, you will have a great time. There's a lot of great stuff in here. Obviously, I wrote it, got to this point, like I threw out the things that I didn't like. I didn't put those in. But don't be afraid to go explore the wood. Like we also purposely didn't fill in the woods 100%. Like we gave you a map, but if you look at that map, there's a lot of just like woods. There's just a lot of trees and green space. Go find out what's in that green space. There's a lot of stuff for building kind of scenarios in here too, and mini encounters of your own that don't necessarily fit into the campaign. Throw those in from time to time. If they really want to go do that,
I love roll for encounters. I love that, and you guys did include so much of it. Like Megan had to pull the book away from me because I was just going through all of the different encounters and stuff. But I love stuff like that, and that's great advice that I've been trying to tell her, but I don't think she's absorbing it, so she better listen to you.
I mean, so and again, this is part of that larger discourse of producing content in role-playing games. There are some obvious big names. Even if you're not in D&D, you know who they are, right? And don't be like them. I mean, start there. Start with don't be that. Because if you start with I have to be this, it's going to be a rough road, man. Like there's years of experience. There's literal acting training. There's money and production value that most people don't have. And I guarantee you from my heart and soul, 100%, you do not have to do that to have a good, fun time that your viewers are going to watch. So, and it's human to compare yourself, right? It's human to say, I have to be like this. This is what I'm striving for. But, kind of do your own thing. That's kind of like my general GM facilitator DM advice is, you do you find what your style is, find what your players want to do, engage organically and genuinely with them, and you will succeed.
I love that. And I think that I think that Megan's going to do a good job no matter what, but I think that's great advice. I think it's great advice for anybody. Moving on to we're sort of segueing out of Humblewood, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Here it is.
I've been waiting to throw that in there. Humblewood is different from a lot of your other RPGs, which you just talked about, like Mall Kids. Can you talk about some of the differences between those large rule-heavy systems and then those storytelling sort of role-play forward games that you have put out?
Yeah. So just for me personally, I have 2 businesses, if you will. I'm not like a career designer. I have a full-time job. I work my 9 to 5. I get paid for that. That's my income. Everything I do in RPG is like, I make supplemental income on it, but I do it because I want to do it.
Yeah.
So I have 2 kind of lines of business. One is in D&D, and I write guides for how to write content in D&D because I'm super meta apparently. But also D&D is a great place to start writing role-playing game content if you are brand new to like, how do I get in, right? Because it is so rule heavy and structured, you can almost entirely focus on your thematic elements and then just pull in little bits of mechanics from the D&D world and say, oh, I want this rogue to be able to vanish. Well, how do I want him to vanish? Is it magically? Well, here's a spell for that. Here's a spell for invisibility. Do I want it to be physically? Here's a stealth check. Do I want it to be camouflage? Here's what cover looks like. And you can just start pulling those in. You don't have to make any of that. So even though, if you put me down at a table with a bunch of people and say, you can play any game you want, it's almost never going to be D&D. That's just because I prefer, I've grown, I've evolved into this place where I want to do collaborative, what I call storytelling games.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if storytelling games is like a genre, it's like a real thing that other people talk about in the same way anyway, but storytelling games to me are different than role-playing games because it's not about you being a character. D&D and similar games, they want you to be your character, and then the GM is going to take care of the world. So you literally only have to focus on your character, so you're role-playing. Storytelling games, the way I look at it anyway, is different because while you are taking care of a character in almost all of my games, you're also taking care of the world. You're taking care of NPCs. You're taking care of general narrative control. And you do that collaboratively. So in Mall Kids, everybody takes turns framing scenes, and I've explicitly called that out.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of my design for Mall Kids, was the beat structure and saying every single person at that table is going to have an equitable chance to control the story. So there's not going to be any quarterbacking. There won't be any, loud players at the table. Like, sure, those people exist. They will dominate. That's the thing. Get better players, I guess, in that case. But for people who they want to engage, but they just need a little space, this game creates that. And it says, this is your moment. Other people can give you suggestions, but this is your time to do whatever it is you want to do with this story. Your character, Mall in general, NPCs, whatever it is, this is your time. And you get to do, every person gets to control one scene, every beat. There's 6 beats in the game. So the game is trying to be as equitable as possible without a GM.
Well, and I love that. And based on like the other streams that I've watched, even based on when we played, I think that you find that maybe at the beginning of the game you do have those people who are sort of, they know exactly what they want to do and they know how to frame their scenes. And you maybe have some of those people who are sort of timid and they don't really know what's going on. But by the time you get to the 4th, 5th, 6th, beat structures, like, I think everybody's engaged at that point. Like, you have those people who were sort of trepidatious at the beginning. They know exactly what they want their scene to be. They want to start that beat. And I think that it's for someone who just discovered it when you reached out to us, I fell in love when we started playing it. And that it was just such, it was very unique, and I really appreciated it. And now that we're having this dialogue, I appreciate how passionate you are for that structure. And that's one of my like things is, if somebody's passionate about something, I'm on board with it, and it's definitely something that you're passionate about, and I love that.
Yeah, and I do want to give a little bit of a call out here to Thorny Games. They made the game Dialect. Dialect is where I kind of got inspired to do this beat structure. They have a very similar round turn narrative control thing to it. It's built around a completely different game, but again, if you like really narrative focused games, if you like language in role-playing games, if you like really focusing in on language, you have to go check out Dialect. It is probably top 5, top 3 of my all-time favorite role-playing tabletop experiences was playing Dialect.
Fantastic. I'm gonna have to go look it up right after we're done here.
It's back there. It's on that shelf. Again, one of my favorite games.
Right before we jump out of Humblewood altogether, I have to ask you, what is your favorite race that you guys made for the book?
Yeah. It changes day to day. I like the red tail hawk. I like the rangery, the hawk kind of stone cold, aloofness. I love that. But realistically, it's probably Gaius. I raise chickens. I have 7 chickens at my house. I raise chickens, and writing the Gaius class was just, it was fun to say, like, what would a weird, like, let's be clear. I love chickens. Chickens are one of the dumbest animals on this planet, but they're sweet. They have little personalities. They just go about their day. And I love them. So like bringing that in, like, how do I create a class that's like not, or a race that's not great, right? How do I create a race that's just a little weird, I guess? And they definitely morphed into this kind of like salt of the earth, good folk type of class. And my all-time favorite piece of art for Humblewood is one that I don't think gets shared a ton, because I think they went with a different one for the primary, the Gaius Druid.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an old version of the Gaius Druid that you can probably go like dig through Leisha's Twitter feed if you want and find it. But there's a Gaius Druid that I just fell in love with, and I'm like, this is everything I need in Humblewood. Like, I just want to go meet that guy, hang out with him. That's all I need to do. What level do I need to be at to get to meet that guy? And I'm good.
I mean, I guess this is a little bit of a spoiler. I'm not playing a Gaius, but as soon as my character does die or has the opportunity to die, I might jump on that sword just so I can play the Gaius Bard, who's very similar to that Disney Robin Hood guy who's got with that country twang. It's such an enticing idea, so I understand why you enjoy that specific race so much, and that's exactly the answer that I was hoping for.
Right, we basically built a system so you could play Disney's Robin Hood. That's really all I needed in life, was just so you could do that.
That's exactly what it is. So we talked about Mall Kids a little bit, so I want to jump into that sort of a little bit deeper. What made you take on that John Hughes idea of, we're high schoolers, but now we're in a mall? And what made you take that idea and sort of just put dice to it?
Yeah, so I grew up I started working at 14. I had a paper route. And I've been working in customer related fields. I worked fast food. I worked movie theater. I've worked at a mall. I managed a GameStop for a few years. That like is in my blood. And like when I go to a store, I face stuff. I look for, my brain literally told me to say LP, which no one except retail people are going to know that means loss prevention, which means I can look at people and determine their likelihood that they might steal something because I worked in retail so long. So that's just so ingrained. And the kind of like micro culture of retail, of these big retail spaces, have always really intrigued me. And I've been able to see them from both a customer and an employee side. So I have a more kind of complete picture of what a mall is. But then, yeah, there's just movies that kind of fixate around retail, like Clerks is a big one. And, you know, even like Stranger Things, they had like the second season, like what, a third of it took place in and around a mall. Like they kept going back to this huge fancy new mall. And it was just like, yes, these garish monuments to capitalism that take over entire cities. It's just so interesting to me. So that kind of set up the setting. And then the characters. So I was pretty ruthlessly bullied as a kid. And I really started latching on to these 80s and 90s movies about teens, you know, and seeing like the nerd become popular and seeing the cool person fall, right? Like these really like self-serving, kind of awful revenge type fantasies about being a teenager. And so that was kind of like a pendulum swinging back and forth. And eventually I kind of landed on like, hey, what if I just want to like retell my teen narrative? And all of those things finally mixed together. Eventually, you know, 30 some years later, I made Mall Kids, and now I can go back and I can say, what would I do? Like, how can I be cool? How can I be not cool? How can I be trendy? How can I be, you know, whatever? And explore all those different types of teens, all those different types of relationships, all those different types of experiences. And I want to do a quick shout out to the artist for Mall Kids, Caitlin Bruder. She delivered amazing cover art for the first game a little over a year ago now. And it defined parts of the game to see this diverse cast of characters on the cover. I want to be very clear. Like, I try to be diverse, inclusive, equitable, approachable, but I didn't go to Caitlin and say, here's the check boxes. That was just the art she turned in. I said, make Mall Kids sitting at a food court, and she turned that in. And you can see this diverse cast of characters. You can, like, I think we literally got on a Discord chat and just stared at it and made up stories about these 4 kids. Like, there's just this black hole of narrative in this picture that then fed back into influencing how I was writing Mall Kids and what I wanted Mall Kids to be about. So I hope people see that. I hope people can go, oh, I see myself in this game, or I could see myself in this game, or I will see myself in this game.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love hearing about all the weird, different ways people are playing Mall Kids and how it resonates with them. That's probably like, yes, Humblewood campaign funding goal, top 3, top 2, maybe even like prides of my life in the role-playing game world, no problem. But like Mall Kids is like my number one. Just seeing people talk about how they connect with Mall Kids emotionally and personally is kind of everything to me. Like that's why I wanted to do an expansion. I was pretty much done with Mall Kids. Like I did the game, it's out, great, good. And then it was just like, no, I have to do more. There's more. So.
Well, I mean, and even when we played it on stream, like the chat blew up. Like they were so, I think they were a little surprised. This was one of the first like outside of D&D RPGs that we've played on the stream. So they were a little like, oh, what's going on? But like by the time it was over, people loved it. And like people are still asking like, are we going to do Mall Kids again? Was that like, because that was so much fun. And I think even we had a good time. Even we were surprised at how much fun and how, eager we were to continue telling the story. 2 successful Kickstarters for Mall Kids. The expansion just ended. Is there more Mall Kids?
So I know I wrote something that you know what? Yeah, let's do this. Let's do a reveal here. I started writing a scenario creation guide that I was going to give to my writers, the other collaborators on the game, to say like, we're kind of honing in on like what it means to write a supplement for Mall Kids. Before it was just kind of like loose, right? It was just like whatever you want, right? But then it was like, we started playing these stream games and people said, oh, it doesn't make sense to have Cred and Corp if we're in the mall after hours fighting ghosts. They don't care about they don't care how good you do your job. That's irrelevant. So it's like, okay, we need new stats. And then it was just like, oh, but you're at night, so we need a different beat structure. Oh, okay, so let's write like, I just have to change these like times. Instead of saying lunch, I say midnight.
Sure.
But then it was like, well, what is midnight? How is midnight thematically different than lunch? And then I started writing that. And then it was like, oh, but what happens if you max out these? So it crystallized into it's basically 3 zine pages. That's a scenario creation guide. And I am putting that in the expansion zine. So in addition to, oh man, I've lost track. We have like 9 supplements. I'm like more writers, more content. And I think we're up to 28 pages on the book, 28 or 32 pages in the book, up from 24 already. But I'm putting the creation guide in there. So anybody at home, Steven has some ideas I've heard about. Like if you want to write your own scenario, here's some steps on putting that into practice mechanically. Because I'm a writer, right? Like it's still very weird for me to say that.
Obviously.
But I write, and it's right. It is obvious, and yet I still have trouble saying it out loud. I got a little bit of imposter syndrome around calling myself that, but I'm a writer. So for me, when it comes to like, oh, we're playing D&D, oh, we're playing Pathfinder, oh, we're playing whatever, and we want to do something different, I just go, then we do it, right? Like that's just how I work. I write stuff. But there's a lot of people out there who have ideas and aren't writers or aren't role-playing game creators, but they really want to get their idea out. So this was kind of meant for them to just check some boxes, follow a step-by-step guide to say, okay, what are my ideas around this? Great. What are the 2 stats? Here they are. What happens if those 2 stats max? Here's what I write in. And boom, you've created a Mall Kid scenario. So now you can play, I think the expansion really runs the gamut of like, we have this kind of like high fantasy inspired one. We have spooky malls. We have an apocalypse mall. So like, I'm kind of out of ideas at the moment, right? I've poured everything into this, but I'm sure someone else out there is going to say, hey, what about this one obscure 80s teen film that you forgot about? I want to make that in Mall Kids. Boom. That's going to just be included in there. So this is, I guess, like world premiere. This is, I haven't talked about this publicly yet. So
well, listen, Board Game House exclusive. I wasn't fishing for it. I got it. That must mean I'm good at this.
Nailed it.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Listen, I'm super excited because after we were done, I was just like Steven, I was like, how can we take this further? And like I've been thinking since then, like, all right, my character was left alone at the end of that mall. I'm basically king of that mall now. I might just do a session of Mall Kids by myself. Just for shits and gigs. But yeah, I think we're definitely going to do it more on the stream. And like now, like if that's going to get added to the expansion, like I'm 100% on board and I'm super excited to look at that now. So I think that you have a handful of other RPGs, if I'm not mistaken. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Sure, yeah, and my other games. So there's D&D, right? There's D&D and Mall Kids, and that feels like a pretty good binary, right? Like two ends of a spectrum.
Sure.
But then you like slide that over, and it's Mall Kids, and then I have some really weird games. I actually have a lot of solo games. So it was interesting that you mentioned playing Mall Kids solo. I want to say I heard somebody, like a year ago or so after the game came out, mention that they played Mall Kids by themselves, just as kind of like a writing exercise. It's not really set up to do that, but
sure,
100% could.
Yeah.
But I do have games that are meant to be played solo. So one of my most recent ones is a game called Legacy of Steel, which is a game about mech. So I'm just getting into kind of mech culture and mech media and mech content. So this was a game that was supposed to be very mechanically simple, very narratively driven, just as a way for me to start kind of exploring what it means to play a mech game. And Legacy of Steel is just kind of a prompt game where you go, you're creating a mech basically. And the game takes this mech through its long history that supersedes any individual pilot, that supersedes individual militaries, that supersedes whole civilizations maybe. Like it can be kind of, it's meant to be long. It's meant to be, hundreds of years maybe, but like it could be thousands. Okay. You could stretch it. And the goal is to talk about a mech as the central character, not its pilot, not its government, not its military, but the mech. Very and cool. Talk about how it goes through time. And then sub goal, you can take this mech that you've kind of created a backstory for and put it in another game. So you could play Lancer or Beam Saber or Mech Warrior, whatever you want to do, and be like, oh, I wrote this backstory for my mech. Here's how my pilot comes about this mech and how they're engaging with this mech's history and what it means to be in this mech. So, and then there are other solo games. I've been making games. I'm going to pronounce this name wrong. I think it's Takuma Okada wrote this game called Alone Among the Stars, which is a solo game about just drawing cards out of a deck and writing about weird planets. And I love that framework. So I've done have I done two or three? I've done like 2 or 3 hacks of this game where it's a solo game and it's just about telling stories. And I think I think people have more stories in them than they think. I think they go, oh, I'm not a writer. It's like, well, I still don't think I'm a writer. So like, You're not alone, but you have stories. And if I can just write like 2 pages of instructions on how to pull that story out of you and give you some guidance, then I haven't actually made a game. I haven't made a story. I haven't created anything. I've created a framework for you to tell your story. So that's probably super pretentious and weirdly meta and next level game design. But
no, it is not. It's beautiful. It's a gorgeous idea. I love that so much.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at, and I'm experimenting with these other small games. I'm trying to think of what else I've made. I have a game about like telling a story through people scrapbooking basically and describing the memories that they're putting in the scrapbook. What else do I have up there? I have another solo game about beachcombing and picking objects up, and that's again like it's a very thinly veiled like therapy exercise is really what it is. It's just like talk about your, like pick up this rock. How does this rock indicate your relationship with your father? Do you want to put it in your pocket or throw it in the ocean? And it's like, you can do that. Like I like to leave my games space for you to really unpack some heavy stuff if you want, or just say like, here's a pretty rock. Like both are completely valid, good experiences.
That's crazy.
And it's same with Mall Kids. Like if you want to dig into your feelings about being bullied as a teenager, yeah, go nuts. It's there. You can do that. If you just want to, create chaos in the mall and then smooch a crush at the end of the game, great. You can do that too. Like, and that could be light, or that could also be heavy. Like maybe, you didn't have the wherewithal to do that. Maybe you didn't have the confidence to do that, and you want to like re-explore that here. Great. Like I love hearing about that. I love hearing people talk about, how mall kids makes them feel personally and brings up stuff like that. To me is the win. That's how I've won at game design, is if I've managed to create this kind of vehicle for personal expression, I guess.
That's crazy. Though, honestly, those ideas, especially that beach business, it sounds like such an interesting way for me that I would deal with like anxiety or something like that, where if I find that I'm in one of those moods, like if it's just striking me, if I can pick that up, it takes my mind off of all that nonsense and sort of focuses on something, but then it also would let anybody sort of work through what's going on. That's crazy and amazing, and I love it so much. Where can people find these things to get their hands on it?
So yeah, I have you can find all my kind of weird stuff, Mall Kids, Stories in the Stand, Legacy of Steel, all that on mr-matthew.itch.io, Mr. Matthew. That's where you can find all that stuff. If you want to experience my style, Stories in the Sand is free, and all of my Alone Among the Star hacks are free. And then everything else is relatively cheap. I think the most expensive thing I got on there is Mall Kids is $5. But everything else is cheaper than that. So amazing. Go explore that. If you want to get into my D&D stuff, I have a page on DM's Guild. There's not a clean URL I can give you for that.
Sure.
It's not.
We're gonna post it in the description. So
yeah, but if you want to go check that out, again, most of what I have there is guides for creating your own subclasses, and I have a guide for all 12 base classes plus the Artificer. So there's tons of guides there for people to go through, and then I also have some narrative content. I have kind of a levels 1 to 3 ish guide about being on a sailing ship going to a new world. This is great for new DMs because yes, your players could jump off that ship, but for the most part, they're contained. So if you want something a little more straightforward, it's there. Don't get me wrong, it's got its bugs. It's old. It's like 3 years old. I'm sorry, but like, hey, if you want some bones, it might be pay what you want. If not, it's like $1. So like, don't go in with the right expectations. And then the other thing that I put up that I'm really proud of is I have a 14-page guide on playing a bear, a literal bear, like not a magic bear, not a polymorph. I mean, it could be a polymorph bear, but a bear, not a person bear, not a werebear, a bear. And this is from a little bit about me as a DM. I used to be super rigid too. Like, this is what we are doing. I wrote these notes. Here's my 14 pages of notes. We are doing these things. And one of my absolute best friends is born of true chaos, and he immediately said no. No. And it was actually at the time a huge problem for our personal relationship. It like made me reassess, right? I learned from that. I said, this is not the way to DM, right? Like, putting players on literal tracks and saying you have to do what I've said is boring for everybody. So he got off that. We did that boat. He got off that boat and he's like, I don't like my character. I want my character to be mauled to death by a bear, and then I want to play that bear. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's sure. Okay. It started with just basically I hacked together the barbarian and the fighter class and said, yes, that's a bear. And then I fleshed it out and I made a 14-page book. I think it's 2 classes with 2 subclasses. It's like races with sub-races are the main thing. And then there's like some backgrounds to like approximate classes, because you can't be a bear warlock. It doesn't
it doesn't work.
Do that. So it's basically like, here's how to like disregard 90% of D&D if you want to be a bear effectively.
And that's where the idea for Humblewood came from. That was the seed.
I know I prefaced this section with like, if you want to find my weird stuff, go to Itch, but frankly, all of my stuff is weird. So sorry. If you want that like real serious high fantasy, Lord of the Rings, whatever. No, that's not me. You don't want you want me because it's weird and it pushes boundaries and it asks questions and it challenges assumptions. That's what you want me for.
In the best way possible.
Thank you.
So, last couple questions. And these are mostly like about you. This is personal stuff. This is how I want to start. This is how I want to end these interviews. When did you get into RPGs?
Yeah, so I mean, I have the classic answer of like when I was a teenager, I played D&D, and honestly, it was probably AD&D like 3.5. I don't even know. Like we were
Okay.
probably playing it wrong. We weren't playing it well.
I can relate to that.
I dabbled in a little mech warrior at the time too. Me and my friends were like very into mechs, but again, like it wasn't like mech culture. It wasn't mech media. It was like we get this game, and the only thing I remember is that I always wanted to be in an attack helicopter. So like in a game about giant robot suits, I purposely didn't want to be in a robot suit because guess what, guys? I'm weird. That's not a new thing. I've been this way my whole life. And then that fell off. Then I got really heavy into video games. Then I got started dabbling in board games. We played Monopoly and Risk growing up, but I started getting into your Catans and your Ticket to Ride.
Yep.
And then I got into like the heavy board games. And then I found tabletop games through my failure at creating board games. So I started creating board games, and people would play them and they'd be like, yeah, these are rules. Like there's a system of rules here, but we're not really engaged with this. It's not super fun. And so I walked away from that and cried for several days and then said, well, what am I missing here? It's like, oh, it's all these rules. These rules are kind of getting in my way. Well, what if I just write a game? And started writing D&D content. It's like, oh, I can do this. Oh, I'm going to write these more. I'm going to write, Mall Kids, right? Like, and it just, so I've only been doing like RPG stuff, like writing for maybe 3 or 4 years. And I would say I've only been doing it well for maybe the past like 2 years.
Yeah.
Here's the call out to everybody watching. If you want to start writing role-playing game content, do it. Like it's like drawing. You can't get better at drawing if you don't draw. You can't get better at writing if you don't write. So just write a bunch of stuff. Like I have, for every one thing I publish, I have like a dozen things I don't publish because they're bad. Like I make bad stuff all the time. But get that idea out of your head, write it down, write the bullet points out of it. Worst case scenario, it's a writing exercise, but
and it makes room for the good stuff.
It makes room. And then I've gone back to some of those bad files and said like, oh, I'm going to pick this little bit out. This little bit was actually good. I'm going to go put this in a different game. Like I said, leverage other mechanics. Mall Kids is based on Honey Heist. Like the base kind of stat rolling system is based on Honey Heist. The beat system was inspired by Dialect. Is Mall Kids new mechanics? No, absolutely not. Is Mall Kids a new packaging of those mechanics with a new theme? Yeah, I don't know of too many mall teen focused games. There's Malgoths versus Visigoths. That's a hard one. Came out, and then Damn the Man Save the Music are all kind of like tangentially related to this teen 90s mall experience. So we're like really, me and Lucian Khan and Hannah Schaefer, we're like trying to bring mall RPGs. Mall storytelling games is the new genre that everybody's going to be hip to. So like start writing some Mall Kids content. That scenario guide will be out soon. So do that thing.
There you go. And then finally, and we've talked about so much, and we've probably covered this already, but I want to ask the question: can you share a favorite character or a favorite role-play moment from your entire, RPG career? Can you share one of your favorite characters or whatever, just your favorite RPG moment?
Yeah. So actually, the most memorable. I think my top two most memorable moments came from the same weekend. It was with I'm gonna forget all the names. There was I live in Seattle area. There was this weekend where the designers from Thorny Games, Hakan and Catherine, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names, from Thorny Games came, and they put on a whole weekend of language-based games. So that's where I played Dialect. That again, number two favorite was playing Dialect, and we were on this abandoned, I think we were on Mars post, and like we were all teens. We were all like young, or like old teens, young 20s, because they blasted us into space young so we could spend as much time as possible on Mars. And then we basically created our own culture and our own language. And then aliens came and wiped out our culture. And like it sounds like all like actiony, but it was really these moments where it was just like I was playing a commander who failed everybody basically, and watching my character literally just give up because they caused pain in other players' characters. But my number one was playing a prototype that they're working on called Xeno Language, which is based very heavily on oh man, I'm going to forget this. It's the what was it called? The Arrival, the movie The Arrival with Amy Adams.
Yep.
And then the short story that was based on, where you tell somebody this game is about aliens coming down, you're part of the team selected to go talk to them, and it's about trying to communicate with the aliens. But that's not what the game is. That is the vehicle. The game is how are our characters super duper broken, and how do we rationalize ourselves? And so I played a character who was prioritizing work over his partner, and there was another woman there who just got a divorce and had kids, and like we bonded and was just talking about like our relationship with our parents, and it was just like, what aliens, right? Like this, like keep talking to aliens, but I just want to go back and talk about how I'm screwing up my marriage, right? Like I cannot wait for that game to come out. It's just so evocative and emotional, and it's just like that to me is what these games should be.
Right.
Like, do we want to publish content to 50,000 people? Sure. Do we all want to get paid? Sure. Do we want to be commercial successes? Sure. But to me, that's the goal. That's what I'm always striving for, is creating those games that can facilitate super emotional moments for people to latch onto, project themselves onto, learn something about themselves. So, again, if you want weird stuff, you come to me. If you want that like kind of serious, prioritized high fantasy stuff, sorry guys, you're gonna get weird crying aliens.
Matthew, thank you so much for doing this. I have really enjoyed this. I've learned a lot. I'm super excited to dig into some of those solo things, and I think a lot of other people that are going to watch this are going to jump in and find some healing in the writing that you've done, because you're a writer and your perspective on this is so unique and so amazing. I'm so happy. I think this went very well. Thank you, Matt, so much for doing this.
Absolutely.
Do you want to plug yourself a little bit? Where can we find you? We've already talked about where we can get your stuff, but you can toss that out there again.
Yeah, for sure. Most of my games you can find on itch, mr-matthew.itch.io. You can search for me on the DMs Guild if you want some D&D stuff. I am most active on Twitter. It's at mrmatthew, Mr. Matthew. I tweet mostly about my work and my stuff that I'm writing, things that I'm seeing in the community, shouting out other people that I like their work. I also tweet about outdoorsy stuff, and I'm a parent to a 5-year-old. So get the kind of whole rounded experience there. But yeah, that's pretty much where you can get at me. My DMs are, as they say, open. So I love chatting with people. I love helping other people. Zine Quest 2 just happened, and I was in really constant contact with like 5 other creators about like how all of our projects were going. I love doing that stuff. I don't have an unlimited amount of time, but I want to try and do that. So if you like what I'm doing, you're interested in what I'm doing, and you think maybe we could have a conversation that would help you out, definitely don't hesitate to do that.
Perfect. We're going to keep talking about it. I followed you on Kickstarter just so I could, any future projects I could, help be a part of. You back a lot of small RPGs.
I do. I made a Twitter thread about this right before Zine Quest, or during Zine Quest before mine launched. That was about how the business of Kickstarter works a little bit, and how you can influence that as a backer. If you follow me, you see that I back a ton of stuff. I would say like 60 to 75% of those is $1 pledges. And here's like why that's so valuable. $1 is $1. Yeah. $1 is still worth something. But also you saw that. it only cost me $1 to support this person, and you got to see it. So if you go gave them $5, then the net, like my backing is now worth a net $6, especially if you would have never seen it otherwise. And it also bolsters the Kickstarter algorithms, number of backers and number of dollars.
Right.
So, and then you go click that little heart icon and that boosts everything. So yeah, even if you can't get into like a $5 or $10 level, which again, you saw how many things I backed. If I backed all of those at $5 or $10, I don't make that much in role-playing content, but you know, you can go throw them $1. You know, if I back 10 things at $1, that's $10. I've helped 10 people for $10.
Yeah.
And that's great. Even things I don't want, like I don't necessarily want OSR stuff. I'm not going to play that, but I'm still going to back that if I believe in that creator, or I think that creator is doing something cool and interesting, or if there might just be my friend or whatever, like 1,000 reasons. It only costs you $1 to do that. And then if you can't do the $1, right? Like I get it. I used to work in retail. If that wasn't, a factor enough, like I didn't, there were times where I really wanted to engage with this stuff and didn't have money. You can retweet, you can talk about it. Twitter algorithm is also another thing that we want to work on. So you want to retweet, you want to like it, but you also want to reply to it, even just to say like, cool, that bolsters the Twitter algorithm. Now other people are seeing that. That's how you can contribute to supporting creators without doing any money.
If you like what people are doing, you got to do your best to make sure that other people who would also enjoy it are experiencing it. So I love that. It's a great.
As a creator, when I see somebody just say like, I love your game, that makes my whole day. If you want to genuinely positively impact a human being, find a game creator or any kind of creator that you like and just send them a little message, reply to one of their tweets, make a comment, review one of their products, and just say, this is nice. I like the thing that you did. They are going to lose their mind. I guarantee you, even the people who have been doing this for years and sell thousands of copies of stuff, we live on that. Like, it's so validating because we're always questioning ourselves. I'm always questioning myself. So I'm going to project that on literally all creators, but I'm constantly questioning myself. I had one successful Kickstarter. My second Mall Kids Kickstarter had already funded, and I'm still whining about it to my wife because it's not good enough. I'm not doing a good job. And it's just like literally doing a good job. I don't think I'm doing a good job. Seeing the comments come in and say, I like this game. Seeing people say, I have it. I put it on the page. One person said, this is the best role-playing game experience they've ever had. This was their favorite game. That means more to me than you buying the game, honestly. Like, I'm not going to tell you to go pirate my game because I don't want you to do that. But like, if you buy the game, I don't expect everybody else at Board Game House to buy a copy of my game. That's silly. Like, you buy one of my games, play it together. That's how it's supposed to be. But if you say that was my favorite game, that gives me literal life. Like, that can fix a whole bad day for me. So there are a lot of ways to engage with those people. This kind of became a TED Talk about how to be a good consumer of role-playing game content. Like,
hey, listen, hot takes. That's why we're here.
Yeah, if you have the energy, if you have the time, if you have the space, you don't have to give dollars to creators to validate them, to support them, to share their work. There's a lot of other ways to do that. And I promise you that is so meaningful to them. Even if they don't respond, some people, again, they don't have the energy to respond to everybody. If you're looking for like a mutual follow, right? If you're looking for, there's a name for that, like a shared follow or whatever, don't do that. But like, if you just want to make someone's day, it takes like 8 words to make a creator's day just by tweeting them that you like their thing. So highly recommend it.
There you go. Matthew Gravelyn, thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation with the creator. If you haven't, go find Humblewood. If you haven't, definitely go find Mall Kids. Check out the rest of his stuff. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, consider subscribing below and hit that bell for some notifications on when we post more videos, like Megan's First Time DM videos, like Steven's reviews, like our How to Plays, or even the VODs from our Twitch stream, which you can also join us on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/BoardGameHouse.